particular, and I know you're all going to rush off to read, but it's a news aggregator. And the pension tsunami, the name actually comes from an editorial I wrote at the Orange County Register, and Jack used that for his site name. And it's just, used to be when he started doing it, there were a few stories a week. Some of them mine, you know, there were a few of us that were interested in this issue. Now there's stories, every sort of newspaper, dozens of them. He can't put everything up that's about the pension issue. There's so much stories about that. So that's good news, right? And here I'm reading from a Sacramento Bee editorial. It's a rather liberal editorial page. It says, Democratic legislators obfuscate waiting, we imagine, for union bosses to tell them when and how they can act. Talking about pension reform. So if a liberal newspaper recognizes that the Democratic legislators are completely controlled by the unions, that's progress, right? Willie Brown, the notorious former Assembly Speaker and great friend of the taxpayer, I'm just kidding. He recently, well, it's been a few months now, he echoed a point that I just made before about how what the old deal used to be and what the new deal is, and he talked about the need for reform on pensions and pay and benefits. Bill Lockyer, another liberal Democrat, said that the current pension system is unsustainable. I mean, he helped create the mess, he ought to know. The former chief actuary of CalPERS said it's unsustainable. The Bell situation has got a huge amount of outrage. I was really impressed watching the residents of that mostly immigrant city really get out the pitchforks and have change. You know, because I was in Orange County, which you know, conservative community, and we saw the same sort of pension deals, and all these great conservatives sat on their butts and did nothing about it. And it was nice to see people really get angry, because that's what's going to change things, is people are getting angry. So, okay, this is good news. I mean, it's like saying it was good news when the Titanic hit the iceberg, because at least everyone believed the captain then. But it is that is some good news. There have been some good elections. Some ballot measures have passed in San Diego and Vallejo that rein in pensions or deal with some union power issues. I was in Orange County. And I use this local race because I think it's reflective of some statewide and national trends. A friend of mine, who's now a friend of mine, Sean Nelson, he was a Fullerton City Council member, and Fullerton, they were about to retroactively increase pensions for their staff. And retroactively means that if I'm about to retire tomorrow, I get the boost going back to the day I started 30 years ago. So it's just a gift of public funds. And so they were about to do that, and here's how these deals work. They're done secretly. They're done in what's called a closed session. Legally, cities are allowed to negotiate in closed session, you know, pay and benefit packages. So they're doing it in closed session. And what they do, and if you ever have any of you attended city council meetings, I highly recommend it if you want to be, you know, remember the old program where you take kids to the jail, Scared Straight program, and if they see the jail, they're not going to want to get in trouble. Well, everybody ought to go scared straight and watch a city council or planning commission in action. But anyway, they have to agendize the issue, which is government speak for telling you what the subject that they're discussing is in closed session. So if you go to item, you know, 47A, discussion of the Memorandum of Understanding 1-2376 regarding, you know, you read that and nobody knows what it means, but they follow the letter of the law in explaining that they're discussing a contract with the unions, but no normal human being would know that that's what they're doing. So anyway, Sean called me and said, take a look at this agenda item. And I'm like, yeah, what is it? He goes, well, they are negotiating a retroactive pension increase for government employees in the city of Fullerton. And what happens typically is after they have discussed that in closed session, see, the people doing the negotiating on behalf of the city also stand to gain that benefit. So it's really, you could be sure that they're really working hard to protect the taxpayer in those cases. Remember the, what was it, Willy Wonka and the original one. I always enjoyed that movie with, what's his name? whoever was the Gene Wilder. Remember when the kid was going to do something, I don't know, blow up into a giant strawberry or whatever it was, I forget. He said, "Oh no, stop, please, don't do it." You know, and that's what the negotiating is like. You know, "Oh, please, no, don't increase my pension by 50%. So the folks negotiating on behalf of the taxpayers are actually going to benefit most of the time from the increase in the pension. So they get a deal together. They give it to the union. The union votes on it. Meanwhile, the public still doesn't know any of the details of the pension increase. And that's what was happening in Fullerton. Sean called me and said, "I'm not telling you what the details of the negotiation are. I'm just telling you what the general overview is, which is what the state open records law requires." Well, boy, did everyone come down on him like a ton of bricks. There were people who, fellow Republicans, wanted him prosecuted for allegedly breaking the Brown Act. So anyway, I wrote about it. It embarrassed the city. They ended up voting against the deal. So the unions, Sean was going to run for county supervisor. So the unions, of course, wanted to come after him. And this is what happens when you take a stand against the unions. In a county supervisor's race, usually even in Orange County, it's a couple $100,000 race. They put in $1.2 million of independent expenditures, the union money. That's just the union money. That's not even counting the other candidates' money. The union hack spent $300,000 of his own money. So a guy who's, instead of having to raise $200,000, he's going up against $1.5 million. But Sean won. He won. And so that was the good news. It can be done, but it's a tough road. And he had a lot of support in that case from the Orange County Republican Party. The Republicans occasionally get things right. It always shocks me, but they do occasionally. So anyway, this is what happens. So this is what happens at the local level. At city councils, every candidate runs for, and city council races, you know, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, right, for these races. If the unions are huge players, if they want to take you out, they take you out. Every city council candidate wants to pose next to the police cruiser or pose with the guy with the firefighter uniform on. And that's the public eats that stuff up. And they don't want to anger these public safety unions in particular. And then there are the general employee unions, you know, the purple shirted mobs and those folks. They don't want to take on that group. And these are concentrated groups that have concentrated benefits from controlling the process. So I went to a school board meeting, another thing that you have to do, which is about as much fun as hitting your head against the wall. But you all ought to do that. And I remember there were a few things going on, and there was a room of, you know, a couple times this size, and there were about 7 of us in the audience, just regular folks, if you consider me a regular folk. And then the whole back room was lined with T-shirt wearing members of one of the public employee unions, the school employees unions, not the teachers union, because they had something that they wanted the school board to do for them. And you darn well believe that the school board members voted unanimously to do whatever it is they wanted them to do. So that's what local politicians are up against, and that's why these ridiculous deals, these pay and benefit deals, have moved forward with very little debate and very little opposition, and we end up paying for it. And you know, one of the things I try to do is deal with some of the ridiculous arguments that the union folks have to make. I mean, those of us who are libertarians or in any way in the liberty movement, I think we have to make tougher arguments, right? Because I bet you here in Berkeley, and I've seen it, at, you know, in liberal groups where they say the darndest things, the leftists, right? And nobody ever challenges them on some of their really generous use of facts. But we get held to a higher standard. I know when I'm debating things in different media audiences, and you know, people really do zero in on the exact numbers. And if I overstate anything, you know, that was my biggest fear with the book. I didn't want to overstate anything because you overstate something, and you know, because people don't like what we have to say a lot of the time, so they zero in. The left gets to say some ridiculous things, and they get away with it. So I like to pick on them with facts. Like, for instance, one of the things the police and fire unions always say is that the reason they get these big pensions is because they die 5 to 8 years, some say 3 to 5 years after retiring. Okay. On its face, it sounded like it couldn't possibly be true, because why would there be a big unfunded liability problem if these guys are dying? And I don't really see that they're dying that often. I don't know. I mean, anyway, I went to CalPERS, which is the public employee retirement system, the union-dominated system. They know their numbers, right? They're a bad organization that's riddled with different allegations of corruption and all sorts of problems. It's a horrible group, I believe. However, they know the numbers. So I went. They sent me a presentation with the data that they did, and in reality, police and fire live to be on average about 82 years old. So that's